Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Hey, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. Well, we've got some bad news, at least for Syria, and we the people of the United States who thought that President Donald Trump would be different. It's April 8th. 2017, Saturday. I just came back from the grocery store. On the rack next to the door, they had the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, USA Today, numerous newspapers, big headlines, USA bombs Syria. Seems like all the politicians are all saying it's wonderful. One reporter said it's beautiful. Oh my. Will this be the year that they bring about World War III? Is World War III already happening? Why will they have World War III? Remember, Albert Pike in 1880-something, leader of the southern jurisdiction of Freemasons, and a general for the South in the war between the North and the South, Civil War #1. There's a lot of talk about Civil War #2. He said there would be required 3 world wars, and apparently the first 2 have played out exactly how he said it would be necessary to bring about the New World Order, these wars between the different parties. And apparently, World War III is playing out now. Probably kicked off officially. The strategic planning people for this New Age, New World Order, World War III, depopulating the planet, and the Zionists controlling the world from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. We've gone over many books in my book reviews, Bloody Zion, and so much more. This is series number 119, the Phoenix Journals, number 20, the Mossad Connection. So it's a continuation. This is part 4. Of the Phoenix Journals, which you can go online and see them in PDF format and download them, or you can find them and buy them on used book sites, etc. I've got one in the mail. I'll show you. This is one of the journals. Looks like this one has about 215 pages, 217 pages there on the bottom. Burnt offerings and blood-stained sands. Psychopolitics and the sacrifice of the Phoenix. Remember that Eurovision contest, which is like the American Idol program in Europe? The winner was Conchita Wurst. Wurst is a sausage, a male part, and Conchita is a female sexual part. Conchita Wurst. And the face was dressed up like Jesus with the beard and the hair. Looked like Jesus. The body was a woman in a silky dress. Conchita Wurst. Which is apparently androgynous, and that's how they depict Satan the devil, Baal, as androgynous, singing the song. I mention it because these are the Phoenix Journals. The Phoenix Rising, which has the words in that song, "You Can't Stop Us." Then, of course, we have the Switzerland train tunnel opening ceremony with demons, even with horns, and trainloads of seemingly naked people groping each other. And so much more. So you can go online and find these Phoenix journals, or you can download them for free, like I do, and print out the pages that you're going to read, and put them in a binder. And it's probably cheaper to buy the book if you can get it for under $10 versus trying to print out 200 pages on a $26 ink cartridge. So I want to continue reading from the journals here because of the theme of President Donald Trump authorizing and performing the bombing of Syria, which apparently is irritating Russia, and so much more going on. So this video thoroughly, from the beginning to the end, ought to be quite interesting. Current events and historical events, and information that's documented. So I need to find out where I left off here. Alright, so I figured out where I left off. Gone over a lot of this already, the Phoenix journals. This is part 4, as I said. And you can tell, or I can tell where I left off, because I put little notes on there with a line. And that says part 3, which is up that way. So I know I have to read down for part 4. So I just want to read some of this and then switch on a couple other documents. Like I said, current events, bombing of Syria, taking out Assad. We've been at war with Syria for almost all of Obama's administration. And here President Donald Trump is barely in office, 90 days. And he takes a serious move. And in this video you will find out there are many other things happening all over the world, looking like a posturing to bring us this World War III, which will, during world wars, or when the president issues martial law, all constitutional rights are suspended. We all become soldiers. Anybody who speaks against the government could be called a traitor, arrested, shot, imprisoned. You have to be patriotic. Kill the Arabs. And then over there in Russia, if they're going to be fighting America, they have to be patriotic. Kill Americans. The Chinese, kill Americans. So when they have World War, all these citizens don't have a choice, even if they know the truth that it's all orchestrated by the puppet masters. Quite a bizarre situation. And in World War I and World War II, I would rather guess that the people weren't as informed as they are today. And I think a lot of people will resist World War III. And I think there's a lot of preparation with FEMA camps, technologies, monitoring people with the cell phones, TVs, what we purchase with our credit cards, debit cards, bank accounts, Facebook, who you know, what you say. Could be quite an interesting world. So I think all the political leaders, no matter what country, they're in cahoots with each other. They come from the secret societies. So the enemy is going to be we the people worldwide, forced to fight and kill each other. Or the Civil War #2, bringing mindless zombies to go against business owners and people who have nice homes or whatever. They create the conquer and divide and conquer. The poor against the rich, the gays against the straights, the blacks against the whites, the men against the women, Americans against the Arabs, Americans against the Mexicans, the Russians against the Americans. China may be aligning itself with Russia against America. We don't know, because they don't tell us, but there is a plan, and it's taking place. And when I read from the Phoenix Journal, we can see it goes all the way back to 1980, 1990. And then looking at my other book reviews, some of my books I've reviewed are 100 years old. Some of them were in the 1880s. Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike. So there is a plan. I think people need to wake up, and it's very serious. All right, here we go. The entire incident was an Israeli fraud. So apparently, back in 1961-62, as per my previous video, part 3 of series 119, the Phoenix Journal number 20, the Mossad Connection. Mossad is the secret service for Israel. So back in 62-61, Israeli intelligence began feeding the CIA and other U.S. agencies alarming reports warning that Egypt and Syria, remember they're bombing Syria yesterday, today, were secretly developing an ABC strike force. That would be atomic, biological, and chemical warheads. Strangely enough, on the video I watched about President Donald Trump speaking today, I guess, or yesterday, that Syria President Assad was gassing his own people, and Donald Trump used these words, even beautiful babies. So when he said that, he just went over the top for me. It's a huge deception. So Donald Trump, you can go watch the video, says, yeah, Assad's killing even beautiful babies. Those babies don't deserve that. Syria's been under siege, under attack, maybe 10 years. And apparently, even in the past, back in 1990. So they were blaming Syria back then. Atomic, biological, chemicals, ABC. Warheads allegedly being stockpiled by the Arab nations. This is all a Zionist battle. Secret societies bringing about a new age and a new world order, and they are seriously anti-Christian and they hate Jesus. So figure this out. Who is the enemy? Who is the god of the secret societies? And from the documentation I've gone over, it's Lucifer. It's a serpent. It's the spiritual world, evil angels. The battle continues. As Twilight Zone as that may seem, it seems to be the case. It is what it is. Alright, in reality, the so-called Nazi scientists cited in the Israeli intelligence reports with Dr. Joliffe, a disguised Mossad disinformation agent. So back here in 1990, 91. Look what's going on in 2017. The entire incident was an Israeli fraud, staged to manipulate American policy. The deception went beyond merely stirring up hostilities between Americans and Arabs. It is now well known that the Israelis used it to lobby the administration of President Lyndon B. Johnson for atomic weapons of their own, and they got them. So back in 1990, the Israeli lobby said that the Arabs had atomic, biological, and chemical warheads. And we all know since 9/11 there were no weapons of mass destruction found anywhere. So we can see that the Phoenix Journals, the stuff I'm reading, seems accurate, truthful. Israel now has a tremendous stockpile of atomic weapons, including the neutron and hydrogen bombs. And I've mentioned this in previous videos. Go look up the Samson option that Israel has. And apparently, if the world tries to stop Israel, they're going to let loose their nukes on major cities and take the world down in flaming inferno. There's something really bizarre going on in the world. persuaded that Israel faced the threat of doomsday weapons from Egypt. So, it's Iran, it's Egypt, it's Syria, it's Libya, it's Venezuela, it's the Mexicans, it's Russia. They're playing us for fools. It's China. What do you want to bet one day? They'll say it's Canada, it's Brazil, Korea. Syria, U.S. authorities conspired with the magistrates' agents in providing Israel with the tools and materials for producing nuclear warheads. A fatal decision. That's what it says here. Page 105, the Phoenix Journal, number 20, the Mossad Connection. Kept secret from the American people that ultimately changed the course of Middle Eastern history. Do we all realize how long this stuff has been going on? Strategic decisions. I'm just going to read from the Phoenix Journals here a little while and look at some other documents, current events, historical newspapers, etc. Just to prove what is going on. The European countries and NATO leaders are now worried because every administration since Johnson's has based its decisions on Israeli disinformation. Least we forget Prime Minister Sharon of Israel, when he had a heated argument with the people in his Congress, announced, don't worry about the USA, we control the USA. And also don't forget that in 1913, December 21st, days before Christmas, when everybody else had gone home, the Congress and representatives, they passed some legislation to create the Federal Reserve, which was a Rothschild's bank. The Rothschilds took over the American money supply, and they've controlled the American money supply, hence the politicians and other wealthy elites, and to the detriment of we the people. And they're financing all these activities to bring the world into a one world order, new age, World War III, World War I, World War II. They came after that. I think World War I started in June of 1914 when the Rothschilds in the conspiracy took over or created the Federal Reserve in 1913 in December. So 6 months later, after they took over the USA money supply, they were able to kick off World War I. Timing is everything. And I think President Donald Trump is instrumental, apparently, to probably be part of what President George Bush Jr. was. Some 9/11 event will happen, and Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, will say he doesn't have any option but to declare war. Maybe on Russia, maybe Iran, whatever. And then people, the other countries will all be taking sides. And of course they'll issue martial law in the United States, and probably all over Europe, suppressing the people, taking away our rights. A lot of people, a lot of destruction, a lot of people will die, be tortured. Apparently these evil forces are evil. Alright, so Israeli disinformation, according to the Phoenix Journal. In the early 1970s, the Mossad fed the CIA a stream of disinformation about Iran. There's already talk about posturing to even nuke Iran in the news about Israel nuking Iran, because they feel Iran is a threat to Israel. The whole world is a threat to Israel. They say that anti-Semitism is on the rise. So when people wake up and they don't like the Zionist program, and you say something, they'll call you an anti-Semite. It's almost a no-win situation. But faith in God, belief in God, they can only kill our physical bodies. We ought not to let them take our souls. We can think like good people and believe. I think that's more important. In the early 1970s, the Mossad, Israeli spies, fed the CIA a stream of disinformation. So this goes back to the 1970s. Think about how long this has been going on. 50 years easily, and 100+ years if you go back to Albert Pike, and hundreds of years if you look at the Encyclopedia Judaica and the forward movement in the last 1,000 years of the burning desire for these Talmudic Jewish folks, the Zionists, to have a national homeland. And according to some of the books like the Jewish Utopia, they want to be, they think they are, the aristocrats of the world, and the rest of us were born to be their slaves. This stuff's in books by them that I've gone over. The aim was to increase the huge arms sales to the regime of the Shah, on which Israeli munitions dealers were making millions of dollars. So we can be assured that Israeli munitions dealers are making huge amounts of money. But the result was the overthrow of the Shah and a storm of anti-U.S. sentiment in the strategic Gulf nation. This information is fact and comes right from a State Department intelligence analyst. On a visit to Washington in early 1982, Israeli Defense Minister Ariel Sharon gave Richard Allen, then serving as President Ronald Reagan's chief national security advisor, a file of top-secret Mossad reports about escalating Soviet missile emplacements on the Lebanese frontier. Sharon used those reports to persuade the White House that Syria and the Soviet Union were mounting a dangerous joint force in the region. This, Sharon argued, required preventive Israeli military action in Lebanon. It fitted right into the plan for Nuclear War I, and in effect the White House told Sharon to go ahead. The result was the bloody and disastrous Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Lebanon's just to the north of Israel. Financed and supported by arms and equipment from Big Brother, USA, at taxpayer expense of both blood and money. From files now open in Russia, remember Russia fell, so they say, and East Germany, the Mossad reports on Soviet missile fortifications displayed by Sharon were a total fabrication. It's always proven later to be a fabrication, even with Assad supposedly gassing his people 63 hours ago, and then hours ago they bombed Syria. There's a lot, I've been checking on the internet, and there's a lot of people saying that this is all fabrication. And of course, if you've been paying attention to the news, you know they've been accusing Syria of gassing their own people for the last few years, and it was proven not to be true several times. This is all verifiable. You can go on the internet, check it out. The aftermath of the Israeli aggression and the refugee massacres in Lebanon damaged whatever standing the U.S. had left in the Arab world. This is way back then, 1970, 1980. In 1984, Mossad Deputy Director David Kimchi visited the White House with alarming secret information. The Soviet Union is planning to take over Iran. The way to counter this threatened move was to let Israel supply Iran with high-tech weapons and to open talks with Iran's moderates. Oh, the games people play. The intelligence reports Kimchi brought along were totally brazen fabrications. But the rule during those Reagan years was to accept those phony Mossad memos as if they were holy writ. So who controls America? Rothschilds, Illuminati, Rockefellers, secret societies, all in cahoots, or who's in control of whom? With the Zionist Jewish people, the people into the Kabbalah, witchcraft, sorcery, bent on destroying Christianity. They denied Jesus 2,000 years ago when they crucified him. And I think they need to finish off all the people who believe in Jesus. Part of this divine spiritual war. But of course, in the end, they'll lose. God wins. But in the meantime, we all have to make a choice whose side we're on. And it gets quite complicated. They use words like progressive and liberal, gay rights, freedom. They're deceiving everybody with alcohol and drugs and luxury items while they're mass murdering all those Arabs, and the ones they don't kill, they're shipping into Europe and the United States in the middle of the night. Look it up. UPS planes, I've gone over this in previous videos, were refitted for passengers and flying into New York or DC and busing people out to the suburbs of Pennsylvania, etc. Lots of reports. You can look it up. Don't believe me? While you're looking it up, look up Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Fink Spar. See what he said. Somebody had turned on their phone recorder when he said what he said in Fink Spar. Okay, back to this thing. The outcome was, of course, a series of misbegotten covert operations from which only Israel and her agents got any profit, and a resounding scandal that covered the closing years of the Reagan era with disgrace. So it seems to be little doubt that Reagan, like Clinton, like the Bushes, are just puppets. Now President George Bush is urgently recruiting the aid of NATO allies for military action against Iraq. So we know why they needed to do 9/11. They had to deceive all the people in the United States and the world. And miraculously, while the buildings were falling, Twin Towers, somebody reaches down on the sidewalk and picks up a passport to some Arab and said the Arabs did it. The NATO governments are once again seeing the U.S. blundering into a Middle Eastern crisis staged behind the scenes by deceptive Mossad tactics. But they dare not decline to participate because they know the consequences will be an all-out nuclear war if left to play its course. So it looks like they're just delaying this nuclear war, this World War III. It's probably actually in play right now, but it's just not obvious, unless, of course, you're in Syria right now and you were just bombed last night, or for the last 10, since 9/11? 15 years, all throughout the Middle East, Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Ukraine, Yemen, all over North Africa, all over the Middle East. And who's been paying for all this? Taxpayer dollars. Imagine how wealthy we USA citizens would be if these other people didn't control our government and spending our money by the trillions to take over the world and enslave and kill us. They're using our own money. Will an innocent American civilian suffer death and injury at the hands of their own military? According to this thing, of course. That's what it says here. Right there on that line where my finger is. Why more arms to the Arab world? So they've been arming the Arab world. They needed the Arab world to be armed. Where would they get the arms? Where would they get the money? How could they bring about World War II if they didn't arm the Arab world? Remember, after World War I, Germany was defanged. It was a harmless country because it had been conquered. They had to rearm and resupply Hitler to bring about World War II. There's books on that. I've gone over the books. The U.S. is being required to arm Arab nations and forgive debts to all these deadly maneuvers to counter this open knowledge in the world. So they're worried about all of us waking up. So they have to create distractions. Even a nuking a city distraction, so they could shut up the people who are aware of what's going on. Call those people traitors. Have them arrested, executed. They don't want open knowledge about the truth. Only you, the American people, do not know. Well, that's how I got into this whole, that's what it says here. Only the American people do not know. A lot of Europeans know what's going on. But how I got started in this whole investigation is on one of those big 0 birthdays, as I've mentioned in previous videos. I went down to Costa Rica. A friend of mine was visiting there, told me about it. Jaco Beach on the Pacific Ocean. I was the only American at a tiki bar one night. And half a dozen or more men from Argentina, Holland, Germany, Canada, whatever. And when they found out I was from Florida, living in Florida at that time, they said, wow, we really feel sorry for you Americans. You don't know what's going on. So I was curious, and they told me lots of things. And I had a 2-week vacation. Some things happened, and I canceled it to 1 week. Flew back to Miami, rented a car to drive up the coast. And I noticed all the sky spraying on that trip. 2005. Anyways, I went to my computer and I started researching what they were saying. And after about 2 weeks, I became quite agitated, actually furious. And I jumped in my truck and went over to Barnes & Noble, the bookstore, looking on the shelf for the books that were mentioned. And the books were there. And I realized I was onto something. It's not a conspiracy, it's actually a plan. It's in play. It's been in play. World War I, World War II. They used false flags to kick off those events, just like 9/11. So that was where I got my decision to start reading books and educate myself. And then I promised myself, after I got about 10 years into reading books, I would start making videos or writing books. I never actually planned on making videos. Just writing books. I felt I had to be an expert to write a book, you think? So anyways, when I got close to 10 years, like 9 years, the end of 2013, I made my first video on the Freemasonic Bible, series number 1. You can look it up and watch it. Jammed packed full of references to the King Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem and all this stuff I've been going over, this theology, religion of the Kabbalists and the Zionist Jewish people, Talmudic books, Zohar. I've got a long ways to go, but apparently I'm getting there slowly and sharing what I have. And I like to read these things in these books that I've acquired to try to show people that it's not what I say, it's what the words are on these pages by people smarter than me. So only the American people did not know. Then Israel comes back and proves the point by demanding a forgiveness of her military debts and more arms to protect herself. And you will give that to her also. So they were arming the Arabs and forgiving the Arabs of the money we loaned them, their debts. And Israel says, well, we want more arms too, and you forgive us of our debts also. They fear those arms in Saudi Arabia, and rightfully so, for they will not be able to simply fool the world longer. So here's the USA supplying arms to all the Arabs and Israel. But who controls the USA? Who controls our banking system? These very same secret societies, Illuminati, Zionist people. And you want to use the word Jews because you want to try to understand, but then you begin to ask the question, wait a minute, in Revelation 9 in the Bible, it says Jews who call themselves Jews but are not. Go look it up. And then we find out through my research, I find out, sharing it on my videos, about the Khazarian Empire 1,000 years ago, who adopted the Jewish people's religion because they found out the Jews were the chosen people of God. So they said, hey, we don't want to be join the Islamic Muslim religion. We don't want to join the Christian religion. We want to join the people who are the chosen people of God's religion. It's all deception. Face your own weapons. Just reading the highlighted portions here. What I highlighted. Your past and present experiences seem to account for naught. Do you not see that you are in a most precarious predicament? You have armed Kuwait with your own tanks and Hawk anti-aircraft missiles. So here's these oil-rich countries reaping in billions of dollars. So we tell them, we'll sell you some missiles and tanks, helicopters, jet planes to defend yourself against your enemies. Then we go over the people who control the U.S. and the huge corporations, the military machine that previous presidents have warned us about, including President John Kennedy. So we're arming all sides. I don't want to say we the people in the United States because we the people are kept out of the loop, which now sit in the wondrous Iraq hands. Those are deadly missiles, and your planes will blow up as well as Soviet-built planes. Further, the installations in Iraq, which are placed there by the Russians, render your invisible borders totally visible. These should be very sobering thoughts, America, according to the author of the Phoenix Journal. Why Souter? Simply, he is anti-gun. So we all know why they want to disarm the USA people, the world's people. We already know, if anybody does any research, like in Germany or China, etc., when they did disarm the peoples, then they started slaughtering the peoples. David Souter, the Supreme Court nominee and now judge, has gone on open record in support of gun control legislation. Didn't any of you look up that little point? He will be used as a tool to disarm you, the public, at the earliest possible opportunity. And believe me, they've been trying. There's been a lot of false flags. Boston bombing, Sandy Hook school shooting, false flags, fabricated events, even holding up owls and satanic symbols in the press releases. Boston bombing at 666 Boylston Street. I could go on, but there's plenty of videos on YouTube if you want to see the evidence that people have collected to prove that many of these instances were either mind control or just plain blatant false flags. They think they can get stage actors and do this and put it on the news, and the USA people and the world's people will just be gullible and believe it. And generally speaking, a lot of people are zombies and gullible and do believe it. They're part of the problem because they're ignorant. think on that one woman's march after President Donald Trump was elected, I went and found the website. I shown it on my videos. It was all organized and had their own internet websites for people to sign up, and where people would meet them at bus stations and plane stations, etc. And one woman was asked, "Why are you here?" And she said she didn't know. She just wanted to be part of it. I got friends of mine that are Democrats, and they hate Republicans. You can't tell them that there's any decent Republicans out there. I got Republican friends who hate Democrats. And you can't tell them there's any decent Democrats. People are seriously mind-controlled, brainwashed. Divide and conquer, the Hegelian dialectic. The people who control our world are using these tools against us. I always like to remember that little saying, after something happens, people go, "Well, if we'd only known before, we could have prevented this." Well, I'm here to say now, we do know, and we can prevent it. And people, when they leave this planet, I don't care if the city gets nuked and everybody gets died and all those souls got to go before a judgment. What's the question going to be? What did you do? Did you know something was going to happen? Why did you want to just be apathetic? Did you really think ignorance was bliss? How's it going to work out for your soul? Just some interesting questions to ask oneself. Alright, in the Phoenix Journal, I showed this in the last video, but it mentioned a couple referenced magazines, newspapers. This one is the Insight, good name. On the news, February 11th, 1991. I've been reading this. Look at the tank. Stop Saddam Hussein. Stop Saddam Hitler. Do you see what they do with propaganda? We all know what Hitler is, Hitler means something to our minds because the education system and the government and the propaganda machine has led us to believe a certain viewpoint about Germany and Hitler. They don't bother to tell people that it was IBM and other huge corporations and elite people, even people who wound up being president of the United States, who were backing, financing, and arming and militarizing Hitler's Germany. But a lot of people are brainwashed, so now they call Saddam Hitler back in 1991. They invaded Iraq in 1991. Then, of course, after 9/11, 2002 or something, they invaded Iraq again. And, of course, if you check into it, you know that a lot of archaeologists and military types made beelines for museums and have been digging in ruins, finding ancient artifacts, trying to support some theory about Anunnaki aliens or beings from planet Nibiru. Crazy and bizarre. Alright, so I'm going to look at this spotlight. Just providing further evidence to what I'm talking about. War with Iran. This guy's been a serious player over the years. So let me read a little bit from this. I pre-read this book entirely, this newspaper. War with Iran. Reagan team plans a strong action. Assassins pursue free Cuban leaders. Is Big Brother watching you? This is January 19th, 1981. Alright, so let's go see what it says here about former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger is on a private tour of the Middle East. He is informing Middle East leaders privately that the incoming Reagan administration is contemplating a declaration of war against Iraq. A little FYI, there are 666 calculators on the internet. You can plug in your name and see what the numerical value is. A equals 6, B equals 12, C equals 18. You just keep adding 6. Kissinger is 666. FYI. And when I found out why Newt Gingrich got divorced, apparently wife swapping or something like that, I said to myself, that's one of the hallmarks, trademarks, for satanic cults. So I said, Newt Gingrich must be 666 too. I put Newton Gingrich, N Gingrich, every variation I could find. I don't know why my intuitive instincts told me that Newton Gingrich was 666. But anyways, I couldn't find it. And finally I wound up at Wikipedia, and apparently he was adopted. His name is Newton McPherson, and that was 666. And then one of the conspiratorial persons who conspired with the elites, secret societies, to bring about an EU, European Union, was Pierre Menat. So behind all those countries, behind all those citizens' backs, they conspired to create the European Union, like they're conspiring to make a new age and a new world order. Well, Pierre Menat is 666. Just telling you where this is going. Eric Schmidt, CEO for Google, will put it in a 666 numerology calculator. It's 666. Monsanto, genetically modified foods. Monsanto is 666. Computer, put that in a 666 calculator. It's 666. At what point do people say these are just, can't be just coincidences? So let's read in this spotlight, 1981, which I found out about in the Phoenix Journals. So I encourage people to go look up at the Phoenix Journals. There's 120 of them. It might take you an hour to download each PDF into a file on your computer and review them at your leisure over the next year, if we have a year before World War III. I suppose when they do issue martial law, when they try to create World War III or whatever they do, they'll probably ban certain books and people talking about certain things. They'll be microchipping people. They'll be arresting certain people, what they call purging the country of people who are intelligent and aware. Those people get killed usually in revolutions, quick, fast, and first. Alright, so it says here, Reagan weighs strong Iran action, including military. My newspaper's falling apart, so bear with me. I want to show you this. Alright, let me read a little bit. Ronald Reagan is planning to take strong action. Sounds like the news today with President Donald Trump in 2017 with Syria. And you know, as soon as Syria goes down, Iran is next. So here's Iran back in 1981. Decisive action on the Iranian crisis when he is inaugurated president. The options include military action. President-elect Ronald Reagan plans to act as toughly against Iran as he is now talking to obtain the safe return of those American hostages once he assumes the role as Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. The nation's next president is now studying 4 military, economic, diplomatic options prepared by his foreign policy and military advisors. Most far-reaching of these rescue the hostages measures would be a proposal calling on Congress to approve a joint resolution condemning Iran as an aggressor against the U.S., for seizing the American embassy in Tehran and the brutal imprisonment of 52 American citizens. The hard-nosed resolution is being modeled after those overwhelmingly approved in advance of the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis and earlier West Berlin crisis during the administration of the late President John Kennedy. The urgent objective is to line up the politically split Congress and the general public. So they need to line up the general public. They need to convince everybody of what they're doing is the right thing to do. Even though we can find out we have all been deceived many times before, World War I, World War II. All right. To build up international pressure to force the crumbling Iranian government to release the Americans. The strategy of Reagan and his advisors will be to use the Congressional Revolution as a legal basis for whatever measures are taken against the Iranians. It is the position of Reagan that Iran entered a state of war against the U.S. on November 4th, 1979 by seizing the U.S. embassy and personnel. So what will they use to say that we have entered a state of war to bring about World War III? What will they do? Other options being seriously considered by Reagan include a naval and air quarantine of Iran to halt all exports and imports, including oil, to and from that country, with the exception of food and medicine. So it just really killed me when I saw President Donald Trump on the TV news saying that Syria, President Assad of Syria, even killed beautiful babies. That's what the word he used were. What kind of effect do you think that has on people? You really think, and I've seen Assad in speaking lectures and interviews with other people, you really think that guy's out there trying to kill babies? Even in Iraq, they said people were killing babies in their incubators in the hospitals. The propaganda is real, the deception, the lies. They use it to mess with our minds. A blunt warning to Iran that if the U.S. hostages are not released by February 1, the U.S. will permanently seize $1 billion a day of Iranian assets in payment for crimes against the U.S. hostages. Iranian leaders would be warned that if they would be held personally responsible if the U.S. hostages are put on trial or harmed. So they got a nice little cartoon down here. I'm not going to read all of this. Well, there is one portion here that has a highlighted title, so I'll read it. Stopping the Soviets. This is 1981. As for the growing danger that the USSR might attempt to take over the oil-rich Iran, if the new administration uses military measures to free the hostages, Reagan tells his closest aides, I have several ideas on how we can keep the Russians from moving into Iran. The Soviet leaders have their problems in Poland and Afghanistan, and if they move into Iran, they will be creating new ones for themselves, not only in the Middle East, but in their own backyard and in areas they haven't even thought about. So President Reagan back then was threatening to stir up all kinds of problems for Russia. I think they've been trying to bring this World War III about for quite a while. Nancy Pelosi once said, you can look this up, she goes, even the Arabs fight back. But those stupid Americans, our own people, don't have any courage or guts and won't stand up for themselves. Something to that effect. Nancy Pelosi said that. Because they've been trying to stir up we the people here for the last 20 years. Before 9/11, after 9/11. And they have not been able to get the people to rise up in revolution against the government. They want that. Because then the government can seize that opportunity to be the enemy of the people. And they have the equipment. And the FEMA camps set up. And the sky spraying, the dispersal of chemicals in the sky. They could just gas entire cities, entire states. Plagues, flus, biologicals. They can. Of course, the question is, will they? Or maybe the other question should be, when? Maybe it shouldn't be a question of will, it's when. Who wants to say this about our own elected officials? But look at Pizzagate. Look at so much more. Look at this crazy election, giving us Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Two very bizarre people with very strange backgrounds. We can't do better than that in America. All right. One of those potentially troubled areas, according to congressional supporters of Reagan, is in the region of food and feed grains that the Soviets desperately need to meet their empire's basic food requirements in 1981 and through 1985. So what are they going to do? They're going to cut off the food supply to Russia? Force a nuclear war? Is that planned for now? Although it isn't generally known, the Soviets' shortfall of food and feed grains for 1981 is now estimated at 5 million tons, the largest amount since World War II. In order to head off serious food shortages in the Soviet Union, this means the USSR must obtain every bushel of wheat, corn, and soybeans that it can find in the West. Otherwise, the men in the Kremlin could face food strikes and unrest in the heartland of world communism as they did in Poland. Both the Soviets and Reagan recognize that American food is the most powerful instrument that this country has available to stop Soviet aggression, if firmly and properly used. Think about that. They know that American food feeds the world. We know, if you've been paying attention to the news and looking up at the sky, that they're spraying chemicals, aluminum byproducts, barium, strontium, and other chemicals that are detrimental to the soil, to trees, to birds and bees, to humans and animals, squirrels, everything, turkeys, crops. It changes the pH. And they have something called the HAARP system, H-A-A-R-P, microwave transmitters. So if they're spraying heavy metals in the sky, and you know you don't put a fork into a microwave oven. So that's a metal. So if you're spraying metals in the sky, aluminum and aluminum byproducts, and you have these microwave transmitters making the entire sky a microwave oven. And then these heavy metals get in our bodies, and then you can even hear the ringing in your ears sometimes go stronger and weaker. And you can see the ripples in the chemicals dumped in the sky like a magnetic wave. So if they can, they know the exact frequencies, and then they got the Gwen towers, fake cell phone towers, and then cell phone towers and cell phones and all these other electromagnetic transmissions. Using technologies that they're aware of now, that they know about now. They've weaponized this stuff. So even though we have all these heavy metals in our body, they have certain frequencies. They could bathe over a whole city and make all the people agitated. And maybe worse. Maybe cause a lot of cancer, diseases. So they have advanced weaponries now to use against we the people. One of those is called a crowd control vehicle. It looks like a tank, and on the top of it has a microwave dish that can aim at a crowd of people and microwave the people. Alright, the Soviet factor. The Soviet factor, as it is being called, must be considered by Reagan in all his contingency planning for Iran because of the USSR's positioning of more than 100,000 of its troops on the Soviet border with Iran, in Afghanistan, and near the Iranian border. So this was the newspaper. This was the picture in the newspaper. That was the article. There's more in here I want to read. But I'd like to go back to the Phoenix Journals. But before I do that, knowing what I just read there, moving my camera, about 1981, the newly elected President Reagan, the situation with Iran. How deja vu is that we have a newly elected President, Donald Trump, a situation in Syria, and the bombing yesterday. So 1981, 37 years ago. So for 40 years or more, this has been going on. 100 years since 1913, when the elite secret societies, Illuminati, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, banksters, Zionist Jewish people who were into the Kabbalah, kind of a satanic witchcraft religion, this big plan for the New Age and New World Order, and even with the congressional hearings back in the 1920s, where the communists, and the communists were created by the Bolshevik Jewish folks who invaded Russia back in 1917 and killed over 100 million Christians and other good people, destroyed the Christian churches but not the Jewish temples. And then over the next 10 or 15 years, they secretly or were conspiring to import immigrants, Yiddish Jews from Ukraine area, Russian area, Poland area, into the United States, who were causing a lot of havoc, taking over a lot of industries, movie theaters, everything, ridiculing and mocking we Americans here. And this is according to Henry Ford's material in the newspaper he purchased, the Dearborn Independent, just to get this information out, because the Zionist, Illuminati, secret society controlled newspapers, the elites, they would not publish this stuff, of course. And I have the books. We've gone over them. I made videos on them. I will make more. So I'm getting the whole story here. But anyways, let's get to 2017 in Syria and the bombing of Syria yesterday. After they blamed Assad, as President Donald Trump said, of killing beautiful babies. Remember, they've been blaming Assad for killing his own people for a couple of years. And of course, when they did Iraq, they blamed the Iraq president, the Libyan president. They used this as a standard propaganda to reach our emotions. Then look how many times they've crashed economically, whether it's a depression, inflation, or bursting bubbles in the United States since these peoples took over the USA money supply. in causing people all across the United States to lose their homes and their properties, farms, industries, probably mines and other mineral resources. There has been evil events, plans taken against us over and over and over. Even World War I and World War II were all fabricated. The purpose we were going into those wars, making demons out of those presidents and leaders. And of course over there, those presidents were telling their people that we were the demons. Like I said, the puppet masters, the leaders of all these countries, firmly, I believe, are working together with each other. They do not want the, generally speaking, the populace, we the people all across the planet, they don't want all those people to start looking up at them. So they have to have the people looking at each other and blaming each other instead of actually blaming the true culprits, the people who are into this Kabbalistic, Luciferic theology religion, Satanism. I did read the Book of Enoch videos and the stuff with Edgar Casey and so many others, and I've got so much lined up for future videos that continue to support this. And of course they have everybody convinced now there's this Galactic Federation, there's this disclosure coming. About aliens and all this other stuff. Huge distraction. They're concealing the identity of the real culprits. The watchers, the angels who were cast out of heaven. Demonic entities. They're everywhere. Reptilians, gray aliens, abductions, UFO aircraft sightings. And I believe we, our own governments, have these UFO alien craft. I believe there have been advanced peoples on planet Earth all along. Probably technologies and people who survived the Great Flood. And they've been operating behind the scenes, manipulating and deceiving the masses of people everywhere. So anyways, let's get back to what I'm talking about today, April 8th. An email I got. Wilkerson, Trump attack on Syria driven by domestic politics. Former Chief of Staff to Colin Powell, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, tells Paul J. that the Syrian government may not be responsible for the chemical attack and that Trump's response was a violation of international law. So obviously this Chief of Staff to Colin Powell, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, is a smarter guy than me. And he says it's likely that the story is not true on the chemical attack. So he tells Paul J. that the Syrian government may not be responsible for the chemical attack. And Trump's response was a violation of international law. We got another one here. U.S.-Syria strike was illegal no matter who carried out the gas attack. As U.S. politicians and pundits cheer Syrian bombing, will ISIS and Al-Qaeda benefit? The bizarre far-right billionaire behind Bannon and Trump's presidency. Is Trump going to commit the next great American catastrophe in Syria? Trump, Syria, and chemical weapons. What we know, what we don't, and what the dangers ahead are. Running government like a business is bad for citizens. Just got an email. with this particular press release. I don't know why somebody sent it to me. Jesse Hullabin, fight back continues after Seattle teachers reject May Day strike. So there are forces trying to undermine our society all across this country. Here's one that says, police spies wreck lives. Just had a bunch of stuff here. I printed it out. How long will cities like Baltimore tolerate policies that promote poverty? Steve Bannon on the crisis of capitalism and the divine right of billionaires. The divine right of billionaires. I guess billionaires have rights too. They have a right to enslave the population because they have the gold. And he who has the gold rules, I guess. Unless the people wake up. Rattling the bars, how the 13th Amendment perpetrates prison slavery. So pretty soon, everybody will be a criminal if you wake up. And how many people will wind up being slaves? And die as slaves? Certainly they don't have any intentions of ever letting those people go. And that could be all of us. And after deadly Navy SEAL raid, Yemeni villagers suffer more U.S. attacks. See, they're taking over everything all over the Middle East. The Middle East is under attack, and so are we, the people in Europe and the United States, and places like Venezuela, the country with more gold than any other country, more oil than any other country. And the people are starving, have no money to go buy groceries. Figure that out. Trump's tough talk on trade deal is absent from new executive orders. So Trump said a lot of things before he was elected, but apparently it was all talk and no action. In Yemen, could growing U.S. role lead to Syria-style proxy wars? So this is what they're doing all over the Middle East. They're completely bombing everything. Like I said, I got this email, and I just thought how appropriate it was to the information. Trump administration formally abandons regime change policy in Syria and many other countries. Trump greenlights arms sales to Bahrain. So that's contradictory there. So he's arming Saudi Arabia and other countries. But then they say he's abandoning regime change. I suppose he's abandoning regime change just to bomb the smithereens out of the whole country. He doesn't care who winds up in charge after. People will all be dead. Britain's Brexit bill gives government unprecedented powers. So the people who control Britain, the Brexit bill gives government unprecedented powers. So like I said in the news, Donald Trump, the raw and naked face of the system that showers speculators with obscene riches. So what do you think? Is anything going to change with Donald Trump? They gave us the insane Hillary Clinton with all the baggage that she came with as the alternative. And we the people weren't any wiser. Alright, so why is all this stuff going on in the Middle East? What is Zionism? Go back to the Phoenix Journal, page 133, and I'll continue reading. Wednesday, October 10th, 1990. It may have been a day of remembering Columbus in America, but it was a Zionist holy day in Jerusalem. The most important incident of your century took place, and the facts have been kept from you to the extent of the ability of your controllers to do so. So he says here, I have waited until today to speak of the happenings in Jerusalem, for I wanted all of you to pay attention, and I too needed to witness that which would come forth through your cover-up boxes regarding the Palestinian-Israeli conflict participated on Monday last. It may have been a day of remembering Columbus in America, but it was a Zionist holy day in Jerusalem. Sign of signs. The Jewish worshippers, so-called, who were going within the sacred grounds of the mosque on the dome of the rock, claimed by the Jews as Temple Mount. I said all this is a spiritual significant, King Solomon's temple. To lay the key foundation stone in ceremony for the new temple. This is the sign of signs, little Sheilas. Hanton likes to call his readers little Sheilas. He's speaking to us. The sign of signs. All right, listen up. Why were the Palestinians present? Because the Jews had not come to their usual Wailing Wall to have worship. They had brought the foundation stone onto the sacred ground of the holiest of holy mosque of the Islamic religion. This is back in 1990. It was well planned and known about Jerusalem and taunted into the faces of the Arab community. Now you see what all this is about? Why they've been murdering Arabs since 9/11 and before. Why they have maps on Yahoo image site of a greater Israel. Why I've gone over books called The Jewish Utopia. This is a worldwide thing, using the United Nations Sustainability Biodiversity as weapons and tools used against we the people, trying to make us feel guilty that we have polluted the planet. We're the cause of global warming, don't you know? We have to be policed and monitored because we could be potential terrorists, don't you know? So what's happening over there to the Palestinians and the Arabs will come home to roost here if we let it. And there will be no excuse. People won't be able to run around and go, I didn't know. Just how weak-minded people are. It's just so sad. A whole country like the United States, freedom, the freedom that I had as a child growing up, which could have been greater had not outside forces ruined the economy that affected my life. Why did the Palestinians throw stones? Because they have no American-supplied weapons and assault rifles with which to defend the populace. All they have to defend self and property, for the most part, are stones. So like I said, all this chaos and anarchy in the Middle East could have never taken place if it weren't for American arms and other weapons manufactured under the controllers of the Zionist banks, their Illuminati secret society types. They want to bring all this about. Why did not the American people become informed on this? On receiving of the information of the uprising, it was decreed by national security regulations to stop the information from the controlled media on the pretext of causing undue panic and the desire for reprisal against Israel. So Israel went into the Islamic mosque, which is built where the old King Solomon's temple used to be. And they brought with them a keystone. A cornerstone was what you put in when you start construction of a new building, to be the keystone for the third King Solomon's temple. And if you look up the Freemasons, and they have made some, even in the Freemason Bible I went over, it was all focused about King Solomon's temple. So there is a connecting of the dots here. It goes right up into the spiritual realm. So apparently they didn't want the people in America knowing about the Israelis on this particular day. Instead of just showing up to pray at the Wailing Wall, they brought with them probably a gigantic granite stone, a keystone, and it really ticked off the Islamic people, the Palestinian people. The Jews were attacking their religion, their most holiest building. It slipped out, however, on 2 occasions. It was immediately squashed, but it did come forth on the 2 programs, and now it shall have to be spoken of if enough raise voices in protest and desire for information. So the word did get out, although it was they tried to suppress it, that the Jewish people, the Zionist people, were trying to put the keystone in place for the new temple, where the Islamic mosque is now the dome. On the evening news at 5 p.m. Pacific time on CNN, just prior to Larry King Live, there is recently a program called Crisis in the Gulf, and there were 2 guests, one a high-level representative of the Arab nations, not Palestinian, by the way, that's what it says here, and a lady Zionist spokesperson. The beans were spilled, and the program commentator tried to cover up the facts and shut up the Arab representative. It was quite amusing. So the author of the Phoenix Journal was actually watching this stuff. A lot of people probably were not aware of what was taking place. A lot of people don't pay attention. A lot of people don't want to pay attention. The media had been told to refer to the incident as Temple Mount and refrain from any mention of the mosque involvement. But you can't uninvolve either of them, because the mosque is built on the ruins of the old Temple Mount. But the Arabs, not Palestinians, for they are not heard at all, had already registered formal protests to all international leaders and governments requiring the Temple Mount reference be corrected throughout the media. So the media wants to call it the Temple Mount. They don't want to call it the Dome of the Rock, the most holy site of the Islamic people. The story is elaborate, and the Zionist, says Zionist here, to be sure, pronounced themselves innocent and were attacked as they prayed. That's the usual story, according to the Encyclopedia Judaica. For thousands of years, wherever these Zionists went, they ran into problems. So I guess one would have to believe that the rest of us are all evil people, and these Zionists are actually the nice guys. not. I did go over the book of Enoch and the Bible and so many other books. No, they were marching upon the mosque, and later pictures depicting the way it was. The Zionists in a long line dancing. I'm reminded of the Israelis on top of a New Jersey building, dancing and videoing the building collapsing on 911. And they were arrested. Some lady looked out her window and saw that and called the police. If you want to read a good book on 911 to see that it was an inside job by the very perpetrators mentioned in this document here, the Zionists, get Webster Tarpley's Synthetic Terrorism, the book. Synthetic Terror. Webster Tarpley. So the Zionists in a long line dancing, laughing and ridiculing the press. This is what Henry Ford said that the Yiddish Jews did in New York. They would sit in movie theaters and sing songs Yiddish language that all of us local Americans sitting in the theater couldn't understand. But if you understood the words, they were mocking we the people. All right. I remind you ones, the last laugh is yet to be had. Why does Hanton not just give you names? So Hanton's the author of this material. Because I want you to care enough about your very survival as a planet and species to look into this. That's what I say when I make these videos. I have a notebook. I have many of them. But when I watch videos, I take notes. The video I was watching this morning was actually quite horrible. You're not going to believe what I'm going to tell you. I may as well mention it. I got the notebook out. The National Council of Civil Liberties. That sounds good, doesn't it? National Council of Civil Liberties. When I tell you what's next, you're going to understand what we're up against. The sickness. The history of the normalization of pedophilia. They actually have these secret societies and these organizations trying to normalize pedophilia. Lower the age to 3 or 4 years old to have sex with children, or eliminate the age restriction altogether. You can go look up this video. Gnostic Media, April 4th, 2007. The history of the normalization of pedophilia. You can plug that in and look it up on YouTube. Watch the video yourself. They want sexual freedom, minority rights, reduce the age of consent, and they have something called a pedophilia exchange. Remember Pizzagate? And there's all kinds of alarming news coming out about abductions of little children who disappear into these sex rings, maybe for their entire lives. And there have been people who escaped and have come forward. So apparently it's not just about sex, it's sex and trauma to children. So sacrificing children and traumatizing them. This is clearly some kind of satanic torture, plain and simple, hatred towards the human race. Secret societies, elites believe everything belongs to them and they just take it from us. So these secret society, these elites, these billionaires and all this, they think everything is theirs. And they just take what they want from us. Part of the problem they're going to have, or they're having, is there's something called the Great Awakening. And so that's why it's kind of critical to pay attention. Because they'll have to do some kind of huge deception, World War III, a plague, terror attack, something, to declare martial law or something to shut the people up, stop everybody from learning the truth or knowing the truth, having anything that they can do about the truth. So there has to be a distraction. So it mentions an organization, Order of Credania, linked to Isis, Urania, and the temple. Just saying, I take notes when I watch videos, even like mine, and I go look up stuff and print out stuff and highlight stuff. Some of us want to find out the truth. So there they were trying to put the cornerstone in for the King Solomon's temple, which is in the Freemasonic Bible I went over, and also references to the when you get the 1st degree, 2nd degree, 3rd degree in Freemasonry and other secret society occult organizations. It has something to do with all of this stuff going on in Israel and King Solomon's temple and the Kabbalah, witchcraft, and sorcery and all that stuff. Magic, occult. Alright, let me read some more of this. So apparently it slipped out on a TV program about this cornerstone for the King Solomon's temple, and the people running the program tried to squelch it, stop it, the information from getting out. And it says here, if I give you chapter and verse, no one bothers to get the truth elsewhere, and this is important information beyond that which you have before received. You go find out the details, for it becomes the sign of the times for your ending cycle according to the prophecies of your acceptance. So if you do read the Revelations and other prophecies, even Edgar Casey's trance readings and all that, you're going to find out that a lot of this stuff is prophesied to happen and is happening according to plan. But again, individually, we need to wake up and not allow ourselves to be deceived, because they have something called soul snatching. Apparently, we all get to choose which side we're on, God and Jesus' side, or the New Age or the Luciferic teaching. And whichever side you choose, when you do die, that's where your soul goes. Apparently these elites know that, and they like to accumulate souls, which are apparently energy. There's been a lot of artwork put out there, but it's a pretty horrible state of affairs, these people who want to turn people away from God. Do you really think the U.S. would have joined in denouncing of Israel for the actions of Monday had there not been more than a stoning or a few killings of Palestinians? So the Palestinians were throwing rocks at the Israelis for installing the cornerstone for the Temple Mount at the mosque site, the dome. Everything so far in the Middle East has been set up against that day of laying of the first foundation stone of that temple, and you ones who sleep on had better open your eyes, for it is about to blow beyond your wildest imaginations. I keep saying this. It's all a plan. 911. Overthrowing all those countries in the Middle East, murdering all those people, bombing all those buildings. There was a reason for this. All this distraction in the United States, false flag terror events, legislation passed, spying and monitoring on all of us, what we buy, what we say. A holy war does not take place over a recovery of a tiny place like Kuwait unto a stupid ruling figurehead. So this is not about Syria or Iran This is about Zionism in the Jewish utopia. And not all Jewish people, of course. A lot of Jewish people are good Jewish people who have written books that I've gone over and where I've obtained a lot of my information from. A lot of Bible-believing Jewish people have been trying to warn us. It's the people who turned away from the Bible to the witchcraft Kabbalah, the Luciferic theology. Fallen angels, if you will, watchers, archons. It's in the Bible, Nephilim. Of course, they want to convince us that's not true. It's the Anunnaki who are coming back with Planet Nibiru. The Great Deception. All right, you are witnessing the beginning of a holy war to end all holy wars. I keep saying that's what this is. Other than over that temple placement, for with that temple of desecration comes the projection of the ending of your world. So when they do rebuild King Solomon's temple, it will be the ending of our world. They don't want us to know that. And worse, your fundamentalist of Christian doctrines will ballyhoo and whoop-dee-dee. This author's funny. For they now expect to be lifted off in rapture of some ridiculous sort. It will be a sorting, but not as they are expecting. Let me assure you. So just a little bit of background religious stuff. A lot of people think they'll be raptured up before this Armageddon event. Something that's supposed to happen, by the way, with the fall of Damascus. And apparently, with President Donald Trump bombing Syria yesterday, it could be the beginning of the fall of Damascus. And at what point will the people in the United States wake up, and at what point will some plague come in the sky, or a nuclear bomb in some harbor or something, and blame it on the Arabs again, like 9/11, declare martial law, or blame it on Russia, declare World War III, martial law, and everybody has to do what they're told like they're in the military, like World War I, World War II. People have no idea. We will all be policed. It looks like the government, with Jade Helm 15 and other resources, is preparing for all this. With the technologies they have now, a lot of people don't stand a chance. They won't even know what's happening when it hits them. Let's hope I'm wrong. But hey, I'm reading this and I see about President Donald Trump bombing Syria, and I'm reading this historic information. So let me take another look at this newspaper I have. Well, what to believe? What to believe? So back in this newspaper, the spotlight. I have to handle this gently, it's falling apart. It cost me a few bucks to get it, but it was mentioned in the Phoenix Journals, so I just thought it'd be interesting to get one of these newspapers and kind of see what's in it. So on page 6, it's quite interesting, kind of apropos to the conversation I'm having. Kissinger, acting as Reagan's agent, backs Zionism in Middle East. Kissinger and the leader of Israel. 1981. This is what's happening now. This is why Syria is under siege and was bombed yesterday. And why they have to take out Iran. Iran is a huge country. And Israel cannot have it existing as it takes over all those other countries and expands its territory, because it will experience resistance, and they're just worried about Iran getting any nuclear weapon and being capable of resistance. Just like they are monitoring all the people in the United States and other parts of the world. And a lot of people have been assassinated who are trying to tell the truth about what's going on. Reagan is following in Carter's footsteps in his Middle East dealings. The latest mistake is his apparent selection of Rockefeller stooge Henry Kissinger as his top advisor and unofficial ambassador. So even back in 1981, they knew that Kissinger, which by the way in a 666 calculator equals 666, is the Rockefeller stooge. Fritz Springmeier's book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati, identify the Rockefellers of one of the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati, the satanic, Kabbalistic religion, and apparently doing dealings with evil entities, watchers or masters on the other side of the veil, the non-physical dimension. God's world, or angels that were expelled from God's world. Mentioned in the Book of Enoch, Dead Sea Scrolls. Alright, read a little bit from this article. January 19th, 1981. Our rupture with revolutionary Iran and the trauma of the 52 hostages imprisoned there could have been healed a year ago were it not for the two cancerous malignancies that have dominated American diplomacy for more than 30 years. The controlling role of Rockefellerism in the U.S. foreign affairs and its fatal concomitant, Washington's blind support for Zionism, now with the Trilateral Consortium, influence more pervasive than ever under the incoming Reagan administration, the U.S. is on a collision course towards all-out war in the Middle East, which will, in the prognosis of the experts, rapidly escalate into World War III. So, regrettably, this fear-mongering and this threat of World War III has been going on for a long time, and a lot of people know it, and a lot of people say, well, Rick, they've been threatening this for a long time. Nothing's going to happen. Wouldn't that be nice if nothing did happen? But we see what's happening right now. We can see the dominoes falling in the last 15 years since 9/11. Doesn't take anybody to be a Sherlock Holmes or a genius, rocket scientist to figure this out. These are the conclusions of a secret Arab emergency meeting at the UN headquarters in New York, convened on January 6 to devise a last-minute mediation formula before war erupts in the Persian Gulf. Henry Kissinger, a lifelong retainer who controlled both the national security affairs and foreign policy during the two Nixon administrations, toured Israel, Egypt, and other countries in the Middle East during the first week of January. His trip was publicly described as an unofficial junket, but according to these spotlight sources, Kissinger privately introduced himself to key Middle Eastern leaders as the top advisor to the President-elect Reagan. I believe Kissinger probably just visited President Donald Trump. Kissinger warned that the incoming U.S. administration was contemplating a declaration of war against Iran as its next move in the long drawn-out hostage stalemate. As Kissinger phrased it, according to the Spotlight sources, a war move would be preceded by the deployment of U.S. ground forces on Israeli and Egyptian bases, exactly as demanded by Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin during his most recent visit to Washington. So back in 1981, the leader of Israel was demanding this war with Iran. And they're talking about it now like it's going to happen almost immediately. So that's why they had to bomb Syria. They got to finish off Syria so they can move on Iran. And go on italreadyhappened.com and you'll see that they're moving military forces all over the world, all different countries. Somebody, it seems like, is preparing for something. The unthinkable intervention of Kissinger, which sent a bolt of astonishment and anxiety throughout the Middle East, was all the more startling since it conflicted sharply with previous assurances by Reagan spokesman that the discredited Rockefeller agent would be excluded from the new administrative's policy deliberations. Wow, you know, President Donald Trump swore he was going to drain the swamp. And a lot of people are upset because the people he's electing to have on his team in government now are the very same people we're talking about, even during the Bush years. We've been deceived. I think a lot of people are starting to see, yet again. With Obama, it was change. We'll bring change. I think Obama did more warmongering in the Middle East than George Bush did. His whole term. It was kind of quiet and a lot of a deception, but it was going on, if you paid attention. Richard Allen, designated as National Security Advisor to the Reagan White House, and thus a key architect of its foreign policy, is known to have personally promised both American and foreign leaders that Kissinger would not be allowed to interfere with the conduct of American foreign relations during the Reagan era. So Kissinger, I believe, is Jewish, and he was the lawyer or frontman for the Rockefellers throughout his whole career. So this Zionist thing and New Age and New World Order is very real. Like it said in the Phoenix Journal when I started this video, the only people who don't know this stuff are the American people. Using emotional and profane language to underscore his own commitment, Allen is known to have assured a number of key personalities that in the diplomatic field, that Kissinger would be excluded by all the necessary means from any function under the new regime. But the wily Kissinger, energized by David Rockefeller's trilateral network, has apparently once again circumvented his opponents and seized a crucial role for himself in shaping America's global role. According to well-placed and trustworthy sources, Kissinger warned his apprehensive Middle East host that oil billionaire Armored Hammer is serving as a confidential personal intermediary between President-elect Reagan and Soviet chairman Leonid Brezhnev. Reagan's selection of Armand Hammer as his personal go-between with Leonid Brezhnev, the Russian leader, has a sort of perverse logic. For his entire life, Hammer has been on intimate terms with the Soviet Bolsheviks. Those are the Jews who took over Russia and killed 100 million Christians and other good people. The same people that were secretly immigrated into the United States almost exclusively during the 1920s, plus or minus. And one of the causes for Henry Ford to buy the Dearborn Independent and report on the goings-on back then, because the elite-owned media would not let the people know what was really happening. Just saying, the names are here, the Soviet Bolsheviks. Beginning with Lenin, Hammer had wheeled and dealed with the Soviets, making $1 billion in the process, and in establishing himself as one of the top capitalists of the world, of the West. But if anyone would have predicted, while he was a candidate, that Reagan would have anything to do with the enigmatic pro-Soviet Hammer, such a statement would have met with incredible. Kissinger has always represented a negative influence on American foreign policy. So it's always been pro-Israel, pro-Zionism, and pro-communism, even though they changed the words and call it socialism, and progressiveness and liberalism, giving people free food stamps and free food and free money. Do people really think that the powers that be are going to continue to dole out that free stuff forever? It's all meant to deceive, to beguile, to lead people down the path to their own destruction. Asserted a senior Arab diplomat interviewed by a Spotlight reporter in the UN Delegates Lounge on January 6th as he left the Arab ambassadors' meeting. But now that he claims to be a Reagan spokesman and a Rockefeller representative promoting war, his intrusion represents a blueprint for world disaster. So I just wanted to point out that in this magazine, mentioned in the Phoenix Journal, that I've gone through the trouble of getting this information, and I'm sharing it on these videos. I noticed a couple small ads in this newspaper, the Spotlight. I thought I'd share that. Here's one called Mark of the Beast. It's proving my point here that people have known about what's happening for a long time. Take away fairy tale explanations on this subject, the Mark of the Beast. Understand how it affects you and our nation. This is 1981. Learn why the internationalists use propaganda, pressure, and a controlled press to bring about one worldism. Who, what, and how he will appear. It will happen, and in and to this generation. Do you have a destiny? So there's people that were trying to get the word out. There's more in here I wanted to share. Here's another one. Just so you know, 1981. Is America Zion? The Bible prophesies in scores of places of a land called Zion, into which the descendants of all the Israeli tribes would be gathered in the last days. Zion was to be a mighty nation, bounded by an eastern sea and a western sea. Eventually, Zion would be invaded by Gog and Magog in a battle called Armageddon. I keep talking about prophecies. It's in this paper here. Many of us believe the Saxon, Celtic, Scandinavian, and Germanic peoples are descended from the ancient Israelites who were dispersed from the old land of Palestine 500 to 700 years before Christ, and that these people later migrated into Europe. We believe Russia and China are Gog and Magog, and the invasion of America by communists, Asians, and other aliens is really the invasion of Israel prophesied in Ezekiel 38 and 39. You cannot understand the hatred the Antichrist have towards Christians, Americans, until you understand Christian America is the true Zion of Bible prophecy. We challenge every Christian to examine the historical and biblical evidence we offer. Write today for your free Zion packet from America's Promise, Phoenix, Arizona. Anyways, it's interesting what was in the news back then. I'll read a little bit more from the Phoenix Journal and end this video. The way things are looking, there may be a part 5, another 2-hour one. This is just one of the Phoenix Journals. There's 120 of them. I make no money off of any of this. You can go online, 4winds10.com, I showed you, and download all the Phoenix Journals. They even have newsletters and other documents. Just a wealth of information by people who back then in the 1970s and 80s, like a lot of the books I have, knew what was going on. We're trying to warn the rest of the people what's going on. Even back in the 1920s when Henry Ford bought the Dearborn Independent, and later on all the Jews tried to, I should say not all the Jews, but a lot of the Zionist, New World Order, One World Order Jewish people, Illuminati, Secret Society, Lucifer religion types, trying to keep all this stuff from the people. Look closely at your unholy alliance. Page 135, Phoenix Journal. The secretive and subservient U.S. entanglement with Israel over the years has produced no significant benefits to your nation. Well, I can clearly say from my research, Israel has been sucking the United States dry of its wealth and health and freedoms. They have things like the Anti-Defamation League, B'nai Birth, and so many more Jewish-Israeli political PACs, political action committees, controlling our politicians, controlling the Federal Reserve. Imagine, just imagine, if they hadn't been the bloodsucker of America and the world. And a lot of good Jewish people who are Bible-believing, God-fearing Jewish people have been trying to warn us. Rabbi Marvin Antelman, to eliminate the opaque Volume 1, Volume 2. Henry McCall, Ph.D., Canadian Jewish author. Illuminati, the cult that hijacked the world. And behind me I probably have 200 books on from this end to this end of this bookshelf. I got plenty of books on this stuff. Books over there, 100 books on conspiracy theories written by many famous authors. Another whole 100 books on the UFO and alien topics. And 120 books over there that I've already read and made videos on. And I have a whole lot more in storage. This is year 13 of my research. So I can say that if, like the general in the South, Ulysses Grant, I believe it was in a previous video, that was in the Encyclopedia Judaica where I got the material. Amazing what you learn. That they had banned all the Jewish people from the Tennessee territories in the United States during the Civil War. Why? Why? Why, for 1,000 or 2,000 years, did 92 different countries ban or restrict the movement of Jewish people in their countries after they were initially welcomed into the country? Why, before World War I, when the Jews were suffering so much in Russia and were fleeing to Germany and were welcomed with open arms in Germany, the Jewish people thought they had found their utopia. A country that would love them and let them come in and buy businesses and property and work. And during World War I, which was because Germany was rising as a world power, and the UK, England, was sinking, so the UK had to stop Germany, these elites again battling each other for power, involving their citizens. England was losing the war during World War I. Germany had advanced industrial technology, submarines, etc. And so, and Germany offered England, the UK, generous terms of surrender. They said, let's just let bygones be bygones and go back to the way the world was. That was pretty generous. And the Jews in New York and other parts of the world, I've got a book on that, and I've made videos on that book, came up with the idea. So they approached the leadership in England and said, hey, we can get the United States into the war on your side. We can come up with all the money you need. Remember, these are the banksters, the Rothschilds, Rockefellers. And we can turn this war around and Germany will lose. But we want your assurance that you're going to assist us in obtaining the Palestinians' land, country, for our national homeland. This was in 1915, 1916. So Germany was betrayed by the very Jews that they had welcomed into their country who had fled Russia. So after World War I, during the hearings, this came out. The Jews wanted the UK to hold to their pledge to give them the Palestinians' land. And when the Germans found out, needless to say, they were shocked and outraged. But apparently there were wasn't any significant action taken against the Jews in Germany. So that was the situation of World War I. Woodrow Wilson was part of the deception. There's a lot of information about that. I'll be reading books about that and sharing more information. That stuff's in Henry Ford's books, The Dearborn Independent. Volume 1, 2, 3, and 4 you can find on the internet. Just look up Henry Ford, Dearborn Independent. In secretive and subservient U.S. entanglement with Israel over the years has produced no significant benefits to your nation. Quite the contrary, indeed. It has thrown the doors opened wide for alien agents and lobbyists to perpetrate murders, dirty tricks, sabotage, disinformation, espionage at an unprecedented scale within the United States, within your own houses. So now maybe people know, if you watch my video and you check up on this information, You can go online and download for free the Phoenix Journal, number 20, the Mossad Connection. Read this stuff. That's page 135. Go watch other videos I've made, other people's videos on these topics, and see for yourself why Syria was bombed by President Donald Trump yesterday, and why in the newspaper, on the Wall Street Journal, and New York Times, at the grocery store today, is that President Donald Trump has made a commitment to take down Assad of Syria, and wants to protect the beautiful babies, so Donald Trump said, his exact words, that were apparently gassed by Assad. If you've ever seen Assad speak on TV and stuff, it's kind of highly unlikely. Besides that, they've been accusing him of that in the past, and it's been proven false. It's been in the news. And again, they accused Saddam Hussein of the same things. They confused Gaddafi in Libya of the same thing. They do this all the time. They lie. These people are Satanists, and what do Satanists do? It's their religion, their commandments to deceive and lie, murder and steal. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.